Welcome to part 4 of Trauma Recovery for the Mind and Body. In this section, we're going to be talking about the body's role in our healing from post-traumatic stress and from traumas. So, the first thing to acknowledge is that the traumatic response is a really good, positive thing. It is our body's courageous attempt to protect itself, to preserve life. And it's an action that arises from the limbic system, which means that it's not consciously within our control. This limbic system is that same place in our bodies that produces that fight, flight, or freeze response. And freezing is very valuable. It's one of our physiological perks, and it occurs upon hypoarousal. Hypoarousal happens as a result of me getting so wound up and so hyper-aroused that there's nowhere left to go except as if we were climbing one of the ladders in Chutes and Ladders. You get to the top, there's nowhere to go but back down the chute. And this freeze is really valuable because it's how we have evolved. The freeze has given us time to determine the best course of action. And we know that since it isn't a conscious choice, we're not actually deciding, but our biology is deciding for us. But this freeze is often why our traumas aren't usually remembered, or at least they're not remembered in a cohesive way. Evolution has informed this instinct. Freezing occurs when our subconscious mind has decided that it's the best way to physically survive this situation. Fighting or fleeing is no longer in our best interest. It's no longer in the best interest of the physical body. You can think about the recommendations for a bear attack, where you are encouraged for certain types of bears to contract your body and pretend that you're dead, feigning dead, hoping that the bear loses interest. And this is one of Mother Nature and our biology's ways of protecting us. Sometimes aggressors in this situation, such as a bear, will lose interest. The fight is over when the bear's prey has ceased to exist. So this freeze response is also really important because data that's coming in becomes compartmentalized. So again, think about your garage and you have your Mr. Potato Head doll, and you're taking apart pieces of Mr. Potato Head and throwing him into different boxes in the garage. Our data comes in and it's compartmentalized, and it's actually doing the body a favor here. Another thing that happens during this traumatic freeze, or in any kind of trauma, even if we never hit hypoarousal, is that the traumatized body contracts to protect vital organs. How fascinating. We'll get to talk some more about that contraction. It's also common to tremor or to shake, to expel excess adrenaline after the trauma has wrapped up. Most of us have actually been socialized out of that tremble response. Take a moment to think, is there a time in recent memory or in distant memory that you experienced your own tremor response? I had the opportunity to see one of mine a couple of years ago when a man that I was dating was in a motorcycle accident, and he was fine, but I remember trembling so badly that I couldn't get dressed properly. It was really hampering my ability to use my fingers the way that I needed them to work. Many of us, though, have been socialized out of this really, really valuable response that helps us to let go of that excess adrenaline that's coursing through the body. Oftentimes with the tremor response, we feel embarrassed or ashamed because it is visible. It's visible to other people, and we don't want other people to know that we're scared, especially if there are children around. you might not necessarily want them looking up to mom or dad or aunt or uncle or whatever your role is to them and seeing this intense fear. So, without that deactivation of that tremoring response, we tend to remain on. And by on, I mean in that hyper aroused state. Think about that panic state that would cause you to jitter. If we don't dispel that and allow the jitters to occur, we stay in that hyper aroused state, and it can actually begin to create in our bodies patterns of chronic tension. Take a moment to think about how not dispelling that energy would create a pattern of chronic tension. Before you move on to the next video, really take some time to ponder it, write on it, maybe drop your ideas in the chat, and we'll meet up in just a moment.